Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to a brand new installment of our Reviewed and Ranked series. We're about halfway through, thereabouts, the entire cast of characters in this game, and today we have one of the first characters that I ever got to max level, and that is Miles Morales. He is an up-and-coming superhero. He hasn't been around in terms of his overall history for very long, but he has quickly risen to the top of some of the favorite iconic Marvel characters thanks to the recent portrayals of him both in comics as well as the Into the Spider-Verse movie that came out a couple of years ago, as well as his titular game for the PlayStation 4 and 5 at the end of this last year. So I'm super excited to talk a little bit more about what Miles brings to the table in today's video, but before we do, make sure you check to see if you're subscribed to the channel. If you're not, go ahead and fix that as I bring daily variety content to you. And if you find today's video helpful and or enjoyable, feel free to hit that like button. So to start, let's go ahead and look at what Miles brings to the table from a team building standpoint. He's not the strongest on the overall team building in terms of other characters that we've looked at this point, but he does have 4 pretty useful synergies. He has a resilience synergy with the Web Warriors, he has a defensive synergy with Generations, he has a mastery synergy with Agile Fighters, and he has a vitality synergy with Ultimate Alliance 3. So no game-breaking synergies here or a large amount of synergies that are going to overpower the team when you build it, but they certainly do have their benefits, particularly in the mastery and resilience type categories. Transitioning over to the base functions of this character, we have the basic attacks, where Miles has a 5-hit combo chain that he will link out, and that last hit in his 5-hit combo, of course, it has that knockback that applies to it with the smaller grunt type characters. The fact that they are melee type attacks that make direct contact with his opponents allow him to buffer or move them around as he is attacking into them, and that already gives him some favorable characteristics in my book. His heavy attack consists of one singular hit with a double, it looks like an open palm strike of both hands with a Venom blast there at the end of it, as that is one of Miles' signature unique attributes as a Spider-Verse hero. As he blasts into his opponents like that, of course it deals an elevated amount of damage as well as that knockback that's applied as most heavy attacks tend to do. And you could, if you're looking to expand some of your DPS output, chain a heavy attack onto the end of your basic combo, substituting that last hit for the heavy attack instead. However, do know that you're not going to get any additional hits out of it, and the payoff may be a little bit more delayed than just finishing out through the standard combo if you do choose to do that. But it might be a good idea, especially if you are looking to take on some enemies such as the large mighty enemies that have those stagger bars and aren't as easy to break down. On Miles's jump, if you hit the jump button again and continue to hold that button, he will activate his web sling. This is a unique ability that we've seen from the characters we've looked at up to this point, but it is a common trait among the web warrior type characters, where instead of double jumping, flying, or teleporting, he will instead use that web sling ability to slowly glide above the ground. And this does have its uses in terms of getting over and around some of the floor traps and hazards that crop up. It doesn't do it as quickly or as efficiently as some of the other characters, especially those who are able to teleport, but it is a nice versatile change and incredibly faithful to the character's source material, so I'm very appreciative of that. Miles' falling aerial involves him throwing 2 web lines down to the ground and then rapidly pulling himself into the ground for a high impact hit. This does have a circular area of effect, so if there are characters behind him or in front of him, it will knock them back or provide that damage to them, with the brunt of the damage being right at the focal contact point where Miles makes contact with the ground. And the block and dodge animation is fairly consistent. He braces his arms up in front of himself to provide some cushioning to those blows, and then he does roll in the direction of input wherever you're seeking to move the character out of harm's way. So let's transition and talk about his signature abilities that he possesses. The first ability is the web shooter, where multiple web blasts will be shot out in the direction that the character is facing. You can continue to use this attack in a repeated fashion by pressing the button or mashing down on that button repeatedly. This does have the shock attribute applied to it, as well as being a projectile type with the synergy trait Rapid Fire. It can bind up some of your enemies and make them immobile for a short period of time, though there are other characters that do this a little bit more reliably if that's the effect that you're looking to achieve. Overall, I don't highly recommend using this ability for its relatively low damage output, but the binding can certainly open you and the rest of your team up to layer in some additional damage if the characters do manage to get bound. This attack has a C classification to damage and energy point consumption, and a very lackluster F classification to the stagger damage that it deals. And upon being ranked up, this ability will receive a reduced energy point cost, an increase to the attack damage dealt, improved binding abilities, and a reduced chance of the attack being interrupted. Miles' second ability is a lot better in terms of the damage output that it can provide. This is the Surprise Strike. This uses another core element of Miles' unique abilities as a Spider-Verse hero, where it allows him to cloak himself and become invisible, and then close in on the enemy to attack them with a burst of electricity. This has a very high damage output with that classification of A, and even does fairly well on the stagger bar of enemies with that C classification there, and maintaining that C classification in the energy point cost as well. This attack has an energy attack type with a bash synergy trait, and as it is ranked up, it benefits from a reduced energy point cost, increase to attack damage and stagger damage dealt, and finally that reduced chance of the attack being interrupted. Miles' third ability is the High Voltage Lines, and don't let the stats on this particular attack fool you, as it is a quite useful ability. This involves a barrage of electrified webs that are being shot out in the direction that the character is facing. There will be 6 different blotches that lay down on the ground out in that direction in a generally conical type distribution. The attack has an energy type and a shock synergy trait, and though it does have the damage classification of F, it hits multiple times and covers a large area of ground. So if you're dealing with a lot of grunt type characters, this is an attack that I recommend personally to have out on the ground about as frequently as you can. Additionally, when used in a synergy type attack, when it's fully upgraded, it will add the shock element to your allies' attacks, which is always a handy thing to do. Additionally, this will kind of put those opponents in a stunned type animation where they're unable to retaliate, and that opens them up to additional follow-ups from other abilities or synergies that you possess or those of your teammates. So I wouldn't write this one off completely. As the attack is ranked up, it benefits from a reduced energy point cost, an increase to the attack damage, the addition of the shock element to your ally attacks like we touched on just a moment ago, and finally that reduced chance of the attack being interrupted. Miles' fourth and final ability is the Venom Strike, which involves Miles rising up into the air and driving both of his fists into the ground and releasing a large sphere of electric energy in the area of impact. This is a pretty balanced attack with its damage output having a C classification to damage, energy point cost, and stagger damage dealt, as well as maintaining that energy attack type and the slam synergy trait. As this attack is ranked up, it does benefit from having the reduced energy point cost, the increased damage done to standard damage, as well as stagger damage, and a reduced chance of the attack being interrupted when fully upgraded. And this is an attack that I think pairs very well with those high voltage lines, especially where it leaves the enemies stunned and unable to retreat or retaliate out of your attacks. And this has the largest impact area of effect of all of Miles' standard attacks. So if you're looking to really increase your DPS, I think that a fairly reliable strategy is chaining the high voltage lines into the Venom Strike and doing both of those in a synergy type attack where and if you can manage that. Miles' Xtreme Attack is powerful in its own right, but you have to be cautious with it. He will detonate his attack right where he is standing and release a large electrical discharge in a 360-degree area around the character before entering a slight stagger animation, and the entire attack takes about 6 seconds before Miles becomes actionable again. So what I highly recommend with this attack, especially if you're looking to layer in damage on any of the boss characters that you're looking to take down, is you will want to try to detonate Miles' Xtreme Attack just before the boss becomes fully staggered, and then release the rest of the team's Xtreme Attacks so they all hit at about the same time, as Miles' detonation does have a longer time period comparatively to some of the other attacks and Xtreme Attacks that we've looked at so far, especially where it does not hit until about 4 seconds into the attack. But don't write it off because it is a very powerful blast. You just may need to be a little more particular with when you time and unleash the ability. So now that we've looked at everything that Miles has to offer, this begs the question, where does he fit in our progressive tier list? And I think it's fairly obvious that based off of his quickness and his attacks and his overall versatility, he easily lands himself in the top half of this tier list, as he's more than just occasionally useful or useful with some odd quirks. So I think based off of my personal experience with him and the efficiency and effectiveness that I've had, I'm going to place him here in the A tier. And I don't think that he outranks Captain America, Daredevil, and Captain Marvel in terms of what he can do and what he has to offer, but I will place him in between Captain America and Ghost Rider. So let's shift these guys over to make some room for Miles right here. And as I've said in the past, I may reorganize these tiers once I've had another chance to fully look through every single character and make some tweaks and adjustments as needed. But for now, I do feel that is a very safe placing for him within the list of character usefulness. But what do you think? Do you think I placed him too high, too low? Do you think there's any elements or attributes of the character that I missed? Be sure to let me know in the comments down below what your thoughts and opinions are. And once again, if you enjoyed today's video, feel free to hit that like button. So thanks again for your time, and I hope that you have an absolutely fantastic rest of your day.